Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you came. Pull up a chair, sit down here. Leave the outside world behind for a little while, with all its hustle and bustle and noise. You know, sometimes our lives seem like that ball of yarn the kitten played with. All tangled up, without ends, without a beginning, without an end. We look at it and think, how am I going to untangle this? We pull a thread here and tighten it there. It seems like there's no solution. And that's where we're wrong. The story I'm going to tell you today is about one of those balls of yarn. A story of a good, faithful couple who were watching the house where they had lived their whole lives. The house that was their world, about to be taken away. It was a story that seemed to have such a sad ending. Until the day the house cat, a little creature that only wanted sunshine and affection, decided to scratch a wall. Strange, isn't it? But you'll see. God doesn't write with crooked letters. He uses whatever line he wants. Sometimes, even a cat's paw. Let's meet Mr. Afonso and Mrs. Elza. Oh, what a couple. He, with hands calloused from working the land his whole life, his face marked by the sun, but with a look that still held the sparkle of youth when he looked at her. She, Mrs. Elza, with hair as white as cotton and a scent of cornbread that seemed to have permeated her. They lived in that house. Oh, my friends, for more than 50 years. It wasn't just a house. It was a living photo album. On that kitchen wall, there were still pencil marks from when their son, Pedrinho, who is now a grown man, measured himself to see if he was growing. That wooden floor, creaking. Oh, that creaking was music. It was the sound of good morning when one got up before the other. It was the sound of life. But life, it has its quirks. An old debt they couldn't pay, something that had grown like a snowball. And now, the cold official letter was on the kitchen table. That table where they had shared bread for half a century. The letter said, auction. An ugly, harsh word that didn't match the smell of Dona Elza's brewed coffee. The silence that fell over the house was heavier than any piece of furniture. Seu Afonso sat on the porch in his rocking chair, but it no longer rocked. He gazed at the horizon, at the yard where he had planted every tree, and his eyes welled up with tears. He asked God softly, "But, Lord, for how long? My whole life I served you. My whole life I trusted. Is this how it ends?" And Dona Elza, poor thing, she walked around the house like a shadow. She ran her hand over the furniture, over the wedding photo frame. She didn't cry aloud. It was an inward cry, a cry that hurt the soul. The deadline was approaching. Only a few weeks remained. Pedrinho, their son, tried to help, but he also had his own life, his own struggles. There was nothing he could do. It seemed as if the auctioneer's gavel was already striking, day and night, inside their heads. Hope. Ah, hope had taken a vacation. It had gone away. They had Sansão, their cat. A yellow cat, somewhat chubby, lazy, who didn't care about the letter or the debt. Samson's only concern was finding the best place to sunbathe. And amidst all that anguish, that silent despair, Samson slept. And Mr. Afonso looked at the cat and thought, "I wish I were you, animal," without knowing what tomorrow holds. They prayed. Oh, how they prayed. But the prayers seemed to reach no further than the roof. It was a dry, tired prayer. You know how it is? When we pray more out of habit than out of faith? When our hearts are so heavy that hope can't even breathe? That's how they were. The house was going to auction, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing they could do. That was the end. Or that's what they thought. But how do we know when God decides to act? How do we know what tool He will use to unravel our tangled mess? The grandfather's tone becomes more intimate, more compassionate. You know, folks, the worst part of the ordeal isn't the day of the storm. It's the eve. It's that long, silent wait. What we call crossing the desert. And the desert for Mr. Afonso and Mrs. Elza was that house. Each passing day, the silence grew deeper. They started to pack things up. And what do you put in a box when you don't know where you're going? Mrs. Elza would take a plate that had belonged to her mother, and cry. She would wrap it in old newspaper, and each turn of the newspaper was a memory. Mr. Afonso, he went to dismantle the crib. Padrino's crib. It was in the back room, gathering dust, but it was the crib. His hands trembled. He would remove a screw, and it was as if he were dismantling his own history. They stopped talking about the auction. You know when the pain is so great that you no longer have words? They just existed. They would pass each other in the hallway, exchanging a sad smile and a pat on the shoulder. Breakfast, which was usually a time for conversation, became a silent ritual. The only sound was the spoon stirring the sugar. Faith. Ah, faith. Faith was there, but it was wounded. It was tired. It was that kind of faith that people keep crumpled, tucked away in the back of a drawer. Mr. Afonso would open the Bible, read the Psalms, but the words seemed distant. The Lord is my shepherd. And he thought, but then, Lord, why am I missing everything? Mrs. Elza would light a candle for her patron saint, but the flame seemed weak, wavering, like her hope. The days dragged on. The sun rose, the sun set, and the only thing that changed was the number of boxes stacked in the living room. The house, which had been a home, was turning into a warehouse of boxed memories. Samson, the cat, he seemed to feel the change. He couldn't find Dona Elza's lap so easily anymore because she was always busy or sad. He couldn't find Seu Afonso on the porch because Seu Afonso now paced back and forth like a caged animal. The cat meowed, a kind of needy meow, you know, as if to say, hey, what's happening to my world? And this question from the cat was the same question the two old people had in their hearts, but didn't have the courage to ask aloud. They tried everything, of course. They talked to the bank manager, who just shrugged. They asked for a loan, but who gives loans to someone who's already in debt? Their son, Padrino, offered to let them live with him, but it was a small apartment in another city. Leave that place? Leave the yard, the land, the smell? It was like uprooting a tree. With each no they received, with each closed door, the slab of despair seemed to lower a little more, tightening their chests. There was a week left until the auction. 7 days. What are 7 days when you're waiting for a miracle? It's an eternity. And what are 7 days when you're waiting for the end? It's a blink of an eye. Seu Afonso looked at Dona Elza in the kitchen. She was looking out the window, standing still. He came closer, hugged her from behind, and the two stood there, saying nothing. Just their two old hearts, beating wearily. The end was there, on the threshold. The desert had been crossed, and it seemed there was no promised land on the other side. It was just more desert. But what they didn't know is that sometimes God's provision isn't on the horizon. Sometimes it's right under our noses, or in their case, hidden in the living room wall. The tone shifts slightly, gaining a touch of mystery and curiosity. 3 days to go. 3 days. The air in the house was so heavy you could cut it with a knife. Mr. Afonso and Mrs. Elza barely slept. They had already resigned themselves to it, you know? It was that sad resignation, the kind you get from giving up. The living room was full of cardboard boxes. It looked like a moving house, and it was. That afternoon, a gray, rainy afternoon, Mrs. Elza was folding some old sheets. Mr. Afonso was sitting in the rocking chair inside the living room, staring into nothingness. The silence was total, except for the sound of the rain outside and another sound, a persistent sound. Scritch, scritch, scritch. A scratching sound. It came from the corner of the room. It was Samson. The cat was standing, with his 2 front paws resting on the wall, scratching. He scratched incessantly in the same spot. That spot was covered with old, flowery wallpaper, already faded and yellowed with age. Mrs. Elza was the first to complain. "Samson, stop that boy. You're going to ruin the wallpaper." As if that weren't enough. She clapped her hands, and the cat ran away. But 5 minutes later, there he was again. Scritch, 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 in the same exact spot. Seu Afonso, who was so immersed in his sadness, looked up. He observed the cat. Samson wasn't playing. He wasn't sharpening his claws, as he did on the leg of the sofa. He was digging. He was obsessed with that piece of the wall. "Elza," he called softly, "leave the animal alone. What else is there to ruin here?" But he kept watching. The cat scratched so much that a piece of the wallpaper tore. "There, see?" said Dona Elza, her voice already tired. But Seu Afonso got up, slowly, his joints aching. He went to the spot. The cat looked at him, meowed, and went back to scratching the plaster that appeared under the paper. "What's there, huh, animal?" Seu Afonso asked, more to himself than to the cat. He ran his hand over the spot. The paper was loose, damp, perhaps from the rain. But the plaster seemed different. He tapped it with his knuckles. Talk, talk, talk. The sound was hollow, unlike the rest of the wall, which was solid. "Elza," he called again, now with a hint of... It wasn't hope, it was curiosity. "It's hollow here." Dona Elza rolled her eyes. "Afonso, for God's sake! The house is falling apart. It's normal. It must be mold, termites. Forget about it. We have better things to do." But Mr. Afonso wouldn't let him. There was something in the way the cat looked at him, as if to say, "Keep going, old man. It's here." He grabbed an old penknife he used for pruning plants and carefully began to cut the wallpaper around the hole the cat had made. "Are you crazy, Afonso? You're going to make a hole in the wall now? The house is going to auction, man." But he didn't answer. He pulled the paper, which came off easily. And underneath, it wasn't plaster. It was wood. A thin board, nailed there, hiding something. It didn't seem to be part of the original construction. It looked like a patch, a very old patch. Samson sat on the floor and stared, as if to say, "Didn't I tell you?" Mr. Afonso ran his fingers over the wood. It was dusty. He tried to pry it open with his fingers, but it was firmly stuck. His heart, which had been beating so slowly, gave a slightly stronger beat. What was that? Why would a cat, which had never done that in its life, decide to dig? But 3 days from the end? Was it just a hole? Was it just a dead rat? A creature? Or was it that thread, that first thread, of the tangled ball of yarn that his life had become? He didn't know. But, for the first time in months, he felt the urge to find out what tomorrow would bring. Grandpa leans in slightly, as if telling a secret. The suspense builds. That night, folks, sleep wouldn't come. Not for Mr. Afonso, nor for Mrs. Elza. The hole in the wall, now covered by a dish towel to disguise it, seemed to be throbbing. Mrs. Elza, who had previously been skeptical, now also had that nagging feeling. "Afonso," she said in the darkness of the room. "My grandfather, my mother's father, who built this house. He always said this house had secrets. We thought it was just old people stuff, you know? Things that people who are getting older say." She didn't finish the sentence. Mr. Afonso got up. It was dawn. He turned on the living room light. Sansão was sleeping, curled up on top of one of the boxes, as if his work was already done. Partner, Afonso picked up a hammer and a small crowbar. "If the house is going away anyway, Elza, at least we'll know what your grandfather hid." He went to the wall. He removed the cloth, and carefully, so as not to make too much noise, he began to force the wooden board. The wood was old, but it was good. It was hard work. It creaked. Creak. The sound cut through the silence of the early morning. Dona Elza was beside him, her hands on her chest. Her heart was beating so hard she thought Afonso could hear it. Creak. POC. The board gave way. Behind her. A hole. A gap in the wall, not very deep. And inside it, dust, cobwebs, and a roll of paper, tied with a satin ribbon, which was once blue, but was now gray with dust. Seu Afonso stuck his trembling hand into the hole. His fingers touched the paper. It was dry, brittle. He pulled. A smell of something stored away came with it. The smell of time. He looked at Dona Elza. Her eyes were wide. He untied the ribbon, which crumbled into dust on his fingers, and he opened the paper. It wasn't a will, it wasn't money. It was a drawing of the house, a floor plan, done by hand, with fountain pen ink. Beautiful old-fashioned handwriting. It was the house plan, but it was different. It had a room that no longer existed, and it had an X drawn at a precise spot in the yard, near the old fig tree that Seu Afonso loved so much. And below the X, a phrase written, "Where the root meets the foundation, provision rests." Where the root meets the foundation. Seu Afonso read aloud. His voice faltered. "Afonso, what is this?" "I don't know, Elza. I don't know, but it's a map. Your grandfather. He left a map. The connection. The cat scratching the wall. The loose board. Dona Elza's memory of her grandfather. And now, a map. The pieces. The pieces of a puzzle they didn't even know they were putting together. The provision rests." Dona Elza repeated softly. Provision. It was a word they hadn't used in so long. Hope, my friends. It's stubborn. Even when we think it's dead, it was just sleeping. And at that moment, in the middle of the night, in that room full of boxes, with a hole in the wall and an old map in hand, Hope awoke. It opened its eyes. The auction was in 2 days. The sun was almost rising. And Seu Afonso, for the first time in a long time, felt no fear of the day that was beginning. He looked out the window at the fig tree in the distance, the root, the foundation. What could be there? The tone is now one of climax, of revelation. The grandfather speaks with emotion, pausing, savoring the victory. Dawn broke. Barely had the sun peeked out when São Afonso was already up, shovel in hand. Dona Elza went with him, carrying a mug of coffee, which he didn't even touch. The air was cold from the early morning, but São Afonso was sweating. He went to the fig tree. The tree was immense, its roots spreading like thick veins in the earth. "Where the root meets the foundation," he murmured, looking at the map and then at the ground. He found the spot. It was a strange little place, where one of the fig tree's thickest roots seemed to plunge back into the earth, very close to where the kitchen foundation was. He stuck the shovel in. The earth was hard. Fry, fry, fry. The sound was dry. Dona Elza watched, biting her nails. "Careful, Afonso, with your spine." But he didn't even hear her. He dug. He dug like a 30-year-old man. He dug with the strength of that last bit of hope that had awakened. He dug for an hour. The hole was already deep. The shovel hit something, but it wasn't a stone. It was a hollow sound. Talk. "Elza, there's something here." He knelt down and began digging with his hands. The dirt smeared his face, mixed with sweat. He pulled. It was a box, a small metal box, the size of a shoebox. It was rusty, covered in dirt, heavy. He lifted it out of the hole. They both stared at it. It seemed like the box was breathing. "Open it, Afonso. For God's sake, open it!" The latch was rusty. He grabbed the crowbar and forced it open. Snap. The box opened. The smell of mold rose. And inside, my friends. Pause. It wasn't gold. It wasn't jewels. It was something much, much more valuable. It was papers. Papers wrapped in an oiled cloth to protect them from moisture. And, along with the papers, a heavy velvet pouch. Dona Elza picked up the pouch. She opened it. Inside, coins. Gold coins, pounds, old, valuable. They were her grandfather's savings. But that wasn't the most important thing. So Afonso picked up the papers. He unrolled them. The first was the original deed to the house. The second, a bank document from that time, a payment receipt. The house was. Pay, the debt they were collecting, was a mistake. An old error. Compound interest on something that had already been paid off 50 years ago. Dona Elza's grandfather, prudent as he was, kept the receipt. And he kept it there, where the root meets the foundation, as a provision. Dona Elza fell to her knees, right there on the damp earth. She didn't scream. She cried. A cry that came from the depths of her soul, a cry that washed away all those months of anguish. São Afonso looked at the papers, looked at the coins, looked at his wife, and he laughed. He laughed and cried at the same time. He raised his hands to the sky, dirty with earth, holding that old paper. "Thank you, my God. Thank you." The house wasn't going to auction. The house was theirs. It always had been. The miracle wasn't the money. The miracle was true. That was hidden. And who was the tool? Who was the angel sent by God to start all this? A fat, lazy cat named Samson, who decided to scratch a wall at just the right moment. The auctioneer's gavel. That wouldn't strike anymore. The only sounds that could be heard that morning were the grateful cries of two old people and the purring of the cat, who had come to see what was happening and was now rubbing against Mr. Afonso's legs, as if to say, "See? I knew it." The provision hadn't arrived from outside. It had been there all along, hidden in the wall, buried in the yard, waiting for God's perfect timing. The grandfather's tone is now one of final reflection, warm and direct to the viewer. What a story, isn't it? I get goosebumps just remembering it. You know, folks, this story of Mr. Afonso, Mrs. Elza, and the cat Sansão, it teaches us something so profound. How many times do we feel like them? Staring at that cold letter on the table, staring at the problem, the debt, the illness, the desert. And we pray, we ask. We ask for a miracle from heaven, a thunderclap, something thunderous. And God, God smiles. Because many times, the provision we so desperately ask for isn't coming. It's already gone. There. It's hidden inside our own house. It's on an old piece of paper, in an old memory, in a word our grandfather said that we didn't pay attention to. It's on our living room wall. And we, with our eyes fixed on despair, don't see it. We don't hear it. We don't perceive the signs. God didn't send an angel with a sword to save Mr. Afonso. He used the most unlikely tool he had in that house, a cat, an animal that, in its simplicity, did exactly what needed to be done, when it needed to be done. This makes me think, how many times do we ignore the gifts that God sends into our lives? How many times does He use something small, a coincidence, an unexpected phone call, a child who says something unintentionally, a scratch on the wall, and we think it's just a gift? We think it's just chance. The faith of Mr. Afonso and Mrs. Elza was not rewarded when they found the box. Their faith is what kept them standing. Until the day the cat scratched the wall. Do you understand the difference? Faith is what keeps us in the house, even when the boxes are already piled up. Faith is what gives us the courage to pick up the shovel and dig, even without knowing what we'll find. God knows the map hidden in your life. He knows where your grandfather, where your past, where His providence hid the solution. Sometimes, we just need to stop looking at the auction and pay attention to the cat. And you who are listening to me now, what is the map you need to find? What is the wall you need to investigate in your life? Think about it. Think about the little things, the unlikely signs. Your provision may be closer than you imagine. I really wanted to know your story. Here on this channel, we're a family. We share bread and we share faith. So I ask you, tell me in the comments, have you ever had a cat in your life? Has a small, improbable miracle ever happened that changed everything? Or maybe you're now, like Mr. Afonso, looking at the boxes, waiting for the auction. Share with us. I read every comment, and your story could be the light that someone else needs today. Let's create this chain of faith. If this story touched your heart, if it brought you a little peace, leave your amen below. Leave your like, which is your way of saying thank you for this story. And of course, subscribe here to our little corner so we can continue this conversation, so I can continue telling you these stories of faith. Remember, no matter how big the desert is, stay alert. God may be using a simple scratch on the wall to show you the map to your victory. May God be with you all. Until the next story.